The National Desk, America's News, now.
When Israel acts to prevent Iran from developing nuclear weapons, we're not only protecting ourselves, we're protecting you.
Israel's prime minister makes an appeal to the American people to support his military campaign in Gaza, why some lawmakers boycotted his appearance as crowds in the thousands protested just outside. Then, a critical shortage of vials for blood collection, the potential problems the CDC is warning of, and how long the shortage could last. And forced evacuations. Thousands of people leave their homes while wildfires rage. Who's in the path? And what this fire season is doing to air quality in the area. This is the National Desk, America's News Now. I'm Amira David. In a high-stakes appearance and in the face of growing global opposition, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressed a joint session of Congress today, a bid to shore up support for Israel's nearly 10-month-long military campaign in Gaza with no ceasefire deal in place. In addition to protests on the outside, came protests from dozens of lawmakers inside Capitol Hill who outright skipped the speech. The National Desk's Matt Galka has the very latest.
For the forces of civilization to triumph, America and Israel must stand together.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's address to Congress, spotlighting rescued hostages and telling both chambers they'd be victorious over Hamas, and outlining his vision for the Middle East while blasting Iran, critics and protesters.
Many anti-Israel protesters, many choose to stand with evil. They stand with Hamas. They stand with rapists and murderers. These protesters stand with them. They should be ashamed of themselves.
Outside, protesters packed Capitol Hill, demanding an end to the Gaza war and Palestinian civilian suffering. Inside, dozens of Democrats boycotted the speech.
We want to send a really clear message, not just to the Prime Minister, but for people in Israel, people in our own country, people around the world, that we need to be promoting peace around the planet.
It's unforgivable that Speaker Mike Johnson, invited him. I wish that Chuck Schumer had not signed that letter to also invite him. I don't think he should be here.
Prominent names including former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Vice President Kamala Harris, who had another event instead of jointly presiding over the speech, skipped out as Democrats remain divided on the path forward.
The United States' relationship with Israel remains ironclad and transcends any prime minister or president, and we must do all we can to get our hostages home.
Republicans compared the boycotts of the speech to a betrayal of America's ally.
Israel was attacked by Iran-backed terrorists, and sadly, they have been attacked by the United States administration.
Netanyahu's address to Congress was his fourth, the most ever by a foreign leader. Whether or not it leads to a breakthrough in a potential ceasefire and hostage deal in the Gaza war remains to be seen. Reporting at the Capitol, I'm Matt Gelka.
As Matt mentioned, in the lead up to and during Netanyahu's address, thousands from around the country turned out to protest his appearance. Capitol Hill police arrested 6 people with 1 report of vandalism and the need to deploy pepper spray in at least 1 area. But the demonstrations were by and large peaceful. Pro-Palestinian demonstrators calling Netanyahu's address political theater, a distraction from what they say is a genocide in Gaza.
What their objective is to ethnically cleanse Palestinians from their land and to continue the process of settlement expansion that has been declared illegal.
How can we not stand up when we see Palestinians being treated the way they are treated?
Gaza health authorities report 39,000 Palestinians have been killed since the war began, with another 90,000 wounded. The numbers do not distinguish between civilians and combatants. However, the UN says at least half are women and children. And the UN also estimates 1.9 million people, 1.9 million Palestinians now displaced. That's the vast majority of the enclave's population. They have very limited access to food and water. And Netanyahu is scheduled to meet tomorrow with President Biden, who has said he will broker a ceasefire deal between the warring sides before the end of his term. It could be something we hear him touch on tonight when he gives a rare Oval Office address to the nation as he outlines the final few months of his political career and explains his decision to withdraw from the 2024 race. Biden is the first sitting president since Lyndon B. Johnson not to seek a second term. His remarks are expected at 8 p.m. Eastern. FBI Director Christopher Wray on Capitol Hill today telling Congress that the shooter in the assassination attempt of Donald Trump was not on the FBI's radar ahead of Trump's rally in Butler, Pennsylvania. National correspondent Kayla Gaskins joining us from Capitol Hill with the new details Wray revealed.
Take a look at what happened.
The investigations into the assassination attempt on Donald Trump continue on Capitol Hill.
We need to know what happened play by play, moment by moment, second by second.
On Wednesday, FBI Director Christopher Wray taking the hot seat.
We're going to leave no stone unturned.
The focus of the FBI's investigation into the Butler, Pennsylvania rally centers on the shooter, 20-year-old Thomas Crooks, his background, and his actions that day. Wray confirming some parts of the investigation thus far, such as the 8 cartridges that were found on the roof where the shooter was located, which would suggest he fired off 8 shots. He also confirmed Crooks flew a drone about 200 yards from the stage 2 hours before the rally.
We have recovered a drone that the shooter appears to have used. It's being exploited and analyzed by the FBI lab.
The FBI also recovering 3 relatively crude explosive devices, 2 from the shooter's vehicle. Republicans and Democrats largely united in their quest for answers.
But regardless of my strong feelings about Donald Trump's behavior, I unequivocally and unabashedly condemn with every fiber of my being the attempt against his life.
Wray says a week before the shooting, the gunman did a Google search to find out how far away Lee Harvey Oswald was when he shot JFK. The same day, Crooks registered to attend the Trump rally. It also appears Crooks acted alone. Congress also investigating the actions of local and state law enforcement, calling those officials to Washington this week as well.
When the Secret Service interfaces with the state police, the Secret Service is the lead agency.
And Director Wray told lawmakers the FBI is still working to decrypt messages that were stored on Crooks' devices as they search for what motivated the 20-year-old to try and kill a former president of the United States.
And Kayla, how was Wray's testimony received by lawmakers?
So, Mira, the FBI director did give new details today on this investigation. Lawmakers did seem satisfied with that. The hearing had an overall very different feel than the hearing with the now former director of the Secret Service, Kimberly Cheadle, that happened on Monday. That's when nearly every lawmaker in the room was visibly frustrated, and Cheadle resigned the very next morning. The investigations, though, here on Capitol Hill are still going on, and they have this era of bipartisanship. You can tell both parties really want to get to the crux of this matter, and that's a feeling that's increasingly rare here in Washington. Amira.
All right, Kayla Gaskins live from Washington, D.C. for us. Thank you. Delta Airlines has mostly recovered from Friday's massive global IT outage that disrupted Delta's scheduling software. That's according to the CEO, who expects things to be fully back online tomorrow. The outage caused thousands of Delta flights to be canceled and triggered an investigation by the Transportation Department. One couple from Idaho decided to switch airlines to save their honeymoon.
What are we going to do? Like, I don't know. Yeah. Are they going to cancel? Are they not? Where are we going?
Right.
At that point, the honeymoon was over.
Right.
Like, that was it. Like,
we were going to go home tomorrow.
Yeah.
And then we did some more digging and found a flight to Orlando, which one of my best friends lives in Orlando. And so we said we'll go there, and then found a flight from Orlando to St. Lucia, not on Delta, not too trusting of Delta at the moment.
And it could still take days for many passengers to reach their destinations. It is still not clear what caused a fire at JFK Airport this morning that forced almost 1,000 people to evacuate. The fire started on an escalator and sent smoke through Terminal 8, impacting dozens of flights. 9 people were mildly injured from inhaling smoke. The terminal reopened after the fire department aired it out. The airport now telling people to check on their flight status before heading to the airport, just in case there are going to be some delays. In your health alert, there is a critical shortage of specific vials hospitals and medical facilities use to collect blood samples across the United States. This warning coming from the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The CDC says the shortage can lead to delays in diagnoses or misdiagnoses, especially in patients with certain infectious diseases. BD Life Sciences, the company that makes the vials, says they hope to see better supply by September. And this year, Georgia high schools will not receive any state funding for AP courses in African American studies. Superintendent Richard Woods did not recommend approval to the State Board of Education, but didn't say why. Many school districts have already canceled these classes. Critics say this will suppress teaching about Black history in schools. Officials in Florida and Arkansas have also cut funding for similar classes. Coming up, over 100 million people are at risk for extreme weather today. Which areas have the highest chances of severe storms? Then HIV could soon become a disease of the past, the medication that could be key to prevention. And later, many Gen Zers are struggling to find work, how changes in the workforce are affecting inflation for the entire country when we come back. Right now, 70 million Americans are at risk for severe weather. Showers and thunderstorms are forecast in the Great Lakes and also across the southern tier states to the East Coast, with heavy rain possible along the Texas coast right into Louisiana. Monsoonal thunderstorms are expected to continue in the Great Basin. Parts of Arizona, New York, and the northern Rockies especially at risk for thunderstorms tonight, with damaging wind possible. 35 million people on top of that under heat alerts today, as unusually high maximum temperatures in the 90s and 100s continue to create dangerous conditions, especially in the West. More temperature records were forecast to be tied or broken. Most areas will get some relief from the heat by Friday. Multiple large wildfires, meantime, forcing thousands of people to evacuate and closing highways in the western U.S. and Canada. The Durkee Fire in Oregon, started by lightning, has burned more than 240,000 acres and closed parts of Interstate 84. It is still 0% contained. Several bad fires are also raging in Washington and California. Air quality is taking a hit because of all that smoke, especially in Oregon, as you can see right there. Right now, former President Donald Trump is holding a rally in Charlotte, North Carolina. It's his first one since President Biden announced he was leaving the race. Trump is expected to turn his focus toward his likely new opponent, Vice President Harris. He's looking to keep the swing state in his column, which he has done in the past. Meanwhile, there's been a surge in voter engagement since President Biden dropped out of the race. The nonpartisan voter registration platform Vote.org saw a 700% increase in signups in the 48 hours after Biden's announcement. But as Vice President Harris's campaign takes off, the Trump campaign is trying to stop her from using funds raised when Biden was in the race. National correspondent Natra El-Nashar reports from Washington.
The 2024 presidential election is transforming at breakneck speed, and now the Trump campaign is crying foul. On Tuesday night, it filed a complaint with the Federal Election Commission in an attempt to block Vice President Harris from accessing more than $91 million raised by the Biden-Harris campaign when the president was still in the race, claiming it's an illegal contribution from one candidate to another. However, the Republican former chairman of the FEC, Trevor Potter, says a crucial detail is that Harris's name was already on the campaign account. Because Biden and Harris share a campaign committee, the vice president and her running mate can continue using the campaign's existing funds for the general election if she is on the Democratic ticket as either the presidential or vice presidential nominee. If the new ticket does not include Vice President Harris, the rules are different.
Experts across the board say if the FEC found a violation, it's highly unlikely they'd be able to take enforcement action before November. In the meantime, that $91 million pales in comparison to what's been raised since the president dropped out.
The Harris campaign reports it brought in more than $100 million in less than 48 hours after Biden left the race. And Future Forward, the largest political action committee to support Biden, says it got $150 million in commitments within 24 hours.
We have people to talk to, we have phone calls to make, and we have an election to win.
The Trump campaign, on the other hand, had more than $128 million on hand at the end of June, according to FEC filings.
We will press forward, and together we will win, win, win.
At the end of this month, each campaign will have to report to the FEC what they've raised. In fundraising emails, the Harris campaign reminds everyone will be watching: the press, Trump's team, and Democrats across the country. And Trump's campaign pleads, we must keep pace. In Washington, I'm Natra El-Nashar reporting.
Natra, thank you. And parts of Yellowstone National Park is closed after a small hydrothermal explosion. You can see the aftermath right here. Park Service officials saying it happened in the Biscuit Basin thermal area yesterday, around 2 miles from Old Faithful. While there were no injuries reported, the boardwalk was damaged. Park geologists are investigating, and park staff will reopen the area once it's safe. Could HIV become a virus of the past? A new study suggests a 100% effective rate of preventing the virus. 5,000 girls and women were given 2 shots a year of a drug called Sunlenca in South Africa and in Uganda and reported no negative effects. The group given pills had a 2% infection rate. Sunlenca is currently available in the U.S. as a treatment for HIV. Its producer, Jaleed, says they are now testing in men before asking the FDA for approval to use it as a preventative measure. And an experimental gene therapy is showing success in a phase 3 trial to combat rare genetic blood disorders. People with hemophilia A do not have enough of the proper protein in the blood to clot properly, and this can lead to complications from surgery or even spontaneous bleeding. This one-time treatment by Pfizer shows a drastic cut in bleeding incidence between weeks 12 and 15 months. The FDA is now set to review the data. Some newer medications and light therapies may help people with a condition that causes a rash or irritation on the skin. Medical reporter Liz Bonas shares what might help it go away.
Hey there, everybody. If you've been struggling with one of the most common skin conditions, often called dermatitis, healthcare providers say there are newer therapies to help that make a big difference. These are a few images of what dermatitis can look like on the body. In most cases, it appears as a rash or discoloration, according to Dr. Pranav Sheth of Ohio's Dermatology and Skincare Associates. His team provided these images.
Dermatitis is a generic term for inflammation of the skin, often that itches, sometimes can swell, sometimes get bumps with it, sometimes blisters, depending on the cause.
He says traditionally the condition is treated with anti-inflammatory agents such as topical steroids, but there are also several newer medications. So I recently had a patient tell me that they went to see a dermatologist and they had this kind of just the skin bumps on their back, and they said, go to a tanning bed. And he said it worked, but usually that's not something you might tell someone for fear of skin cancer risk, would you?
So actually that depends. In general, we do not recommend tanning beds as a therapy because of the risks of long-term tanning bed use and the risk of skin cancers.
But there are, he says, other light therapies or phototherapies as they're known, as well as lasers like these that may have similar helpful benefits for dermatitis without a long-term skin cancer risk. In most cases, these treatments are covered by your medical insurance plan, but getting a proper diagnosis, Dr. Sheth says, is critical. With your health news, I'm Liz Bonus reporting.
Well, the two fishermen who were on this boat off the coast in Rye, New Hampshire, struck by a whale, are shocked but physically just fine. This amazing video captured by two teenage brothers also out fishing yesterday shows a whale breaching the water and capsizing this boat as it struck the back engine.
I've seen some whales pretty close, but never breaching and never breaching and never that in that situation.
Amazingly, this collision may not be unique because we do know earlier in the week another woman in the same area had a similar encounter, maybe even by the same whale. Coming up, the new school phone policy in a Nevada county that's sparking backlash from thousands of residents. We are back right after this. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering the issues that matter most to you. We're taking the pulse of America.
Personally, I feel like they shouldn't do something so extreme.
CCSD students say a new policy to stop phone distractions in class is going too far, including junior Celine Chang, who says it creates a safety issue.
I understand why teachers would have concerns about students being distracted. I understand why parents would have this concern about students being distracted. But I think during emergencies, it's super important for students and parents to be able to be in contact with each other without signal blocking.
The policy requires students to put their phones in pouches like this one during class time. They don't lock, but they have a Velcro seal, and they block phone signal, meaning no calls or texts going in or out. Associate Superintendent Kevin McPartland says the district ensures parents' kids will have access to their phones in emergencies.
Jonathan Roloff remembers his last moments with his 20-year-old daughter, Grace, minutes after she slipped and fell to her death while trying to get down the cables on Half Dome.
10 minutes prior, she was telling me how happy she was, and then like that, she was gone.
The tragedy happened on July 13th. Grace and her dad were huge adventurers. They've hiked thousands of miles together. They drove all the way from Phoenix to check off hiking Half Dome off their bucket list. When they got to the top, the sky was clear, but not for long. While trying to beat the storm, Roloff said some people were slowly descending, and it seemed impolite to pass them. He's now hoping her death will result in changes for other hikers.
For Gen Z, I do feel like we have a disadvantage.
Jordan Reyes is 23 years old and currently attending college. Jordan is a Gen Zer, meaning anyone born between 1997 and 2012. Jordan is having a hard time finding a job that pays enough to afford necessities.
I noticed that if you're trying to apply for something a bit higher level, people always look at your age first. And if it's not above a certain threshold, they don't even look at anything else.
Trinity University's David Macpherson says the shrinking workforce is driving up prices for everyday necessities.
It turns out that Gen Z, at the same age as millennials were, are less likely to be in the labor force. And so when you have a smaller supply of labor, that will drive up the wages.
Coming up, the star athlete who will join LeBron James to lead the U.S. team into the Summer Olympic Games at Friday's opening ceremony in Paris. Salt Lake City set to host the 2034 Winter Olympics as of today. This would be the second time for the city, but this time around, Utah officials had to promise they'd push the U.S. government to stop investigating suspected doping cases involving Chinese swimmers. And if there are any moves to go over the World Anti-Doping Agency's authority, the Olympics Committee can pull the games from Utah altogether. And tonight, we are learning U.S. Open champion Coco Gauff will lead the U.S. team into the Summer Olympic Games at the opening ceremony this Friday. The 20-year-old is set to make her Olympic debut in Paris, marking the first time a tennis athlete has been named a flag bearer. Gauff made the team for the Tokyo Games in 2020, but had to sit out after testing positive for COVID-19. She joins NBA star LeBron James as a flag bearer chosen by Team U.S. members. And we can't wait to see it. That does it for this edition of the National Desk. We do invite you to join us this evening as we break down President Joe Biden's speech and bring you all the reaction. I'm Amira David. Thank you so much for watching.